Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Coach Replay Show. I'm your host, Corey Camp. And today I'm excited to have a guest back with us. He joined us. We were pretty excited about it last season, and he's back again as we focus this next few months on empowering our teachers. So I'm pleased to introduce to you Pete Hall. Welcome, Pete.
Thanks, Corey. It's good to be back. It's good to see you, and it's good to be talking about capacity building. All right.
Yeah. For those who aren't aware, you and a colleague of yours, Elisa Simmerall, have written quite a few books. You also have some books that are just released or about to be releasing. I follow you on LinkedIn, and so you've been extremely active here lately, and I love that. One of my favorite books that's been transformational for me, though, is this. I gotta get the camera right. Creating a Culture of Reflective Practice, and we talk a lot about reflection and the power of that in our coaching work, both for coaches and for teachers here on the Replay Show. And so I'm excited for kind of what you've brought to us, because honestly, if we look at where we are in education, it's always been a stressful job. But I think especially over the past few years, you say it very well in your description for our episode. We've got greater accountability, greater pressure, bigger eyes on us as educators to perform well and do things that seems next to impossible and not always in the best of circumstances. So how do we, as instructional leaders, whether that's teacher leaders, building leaders, coaches, how can we boost our teachers up? How do we build their confidence, build their capacity, and kind of keep them going in what feels like a pretty rough terrain right about now? So
rough really terrain. That's an understatement.
Yeah, I know.
Holy smokes. This is arguably the most difficult time to be an educator in known history, at least in recent history. It has never been easy to be an educator. No one ever thought, I'm going to be a teacher because it's easy. Yeah, it's always been a challenge. We've had all sorts of new challenges crop up over the past couple of years. And believe me when I tell you, there will be new challenges down the road. So this is never going to be an easy profession. So the question becomes, like you said, how do we then support our teachers to be able to survive and thrive in this challenging environment? I look back to Dan Pink's work in the book Drive about the three motivating factors, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And those are three things that I try to weave into my work with others. Autonomy just being the idea that you get to make choices for yourself. You get to decide, right? And I don't know, you probably remember back in the day, maybe it wasn't that long ago, that we had really scripted curriculum that we had to, you had to basically write out the lesson plan, or in some circumstances, you didn't even get to write a lesson plan because it was already provided to you.
It was already provided for you. Print it out and go.
And there's no thinking going on. There's certainly no reflection happening. It's just follow these steps, check the boxes. So we want to give opportunities for our educators to be in charge of something and make decisions for themselves. Mastery is the idea of actually getting better at something. And if you were to couple that with the idea of autonomy, then getting better at something that you actually want to get better at, you get to actually choose how you grow and what area you're growing in. And then purpose is the third. And I think educators kind of have a built-in purpose. So we work for the future, we work for the society, we work for our communities. It's a bigger notion than just clocking in and clocking out when you get into education. So anytime you're able to weave those three elements, autonomy, mastery, and purpose, into the work that you're doing with others, I think you have a greater likelihood of increasing their motivation and obviously productivity. And in the certain or the current situation we're in, helps folks stay in the profession, because we are losing a lot of educators and we don't have a lot of people coming into the profession. So we need to keep the folks that we have and maximize their impact.
Yeah, and I think that's, such a valid point. In so many of the schools that I'm working with, that's one of their biggest, I mean, it's always been, teacher retention's always been a focus of theirs, but it's really heightened because, not only are there staffing shortages, but we're finding ourselves filling those shortages with folks who are less experienced. And not that a less experienced teacher is not a great teacher, but they come in at a disadvantage because they've got so much stacked up against them to learn between, the culture of the school and the community and the practice and the art and science of teaching. And there's not enough hours in the day necessarily for our beginning teachers or those who are transitioning into the field. So they weren't, formally trained in education. I wasn't. I was alternatively certified, and I mean, those first few years was a huge learning curve for me, as opposed to my peers who had gone through a 4-year program, right? So we really have to think about, how do we do that? How do we fill those needs?
And if you want to add an additional complicating factor to that equation, you've got administrators and instructional coaches who are already spread really thin, that don't really have the time and energy to be able to provide the level of support that folks need. When, like you're saying, they're coming in through alternative certification or even not certified. Just
right. Yeah.
You're a warm body. Would you teach for a little bit? And we do have situations where we're finding that happening, and there isn't the level of support to help them be successful, and it causes even more issues for our kids in our schools. So we can
just raises the stakes higher for those who are in the classroom to help their students achieve and perform and reach their potential. So I think, something that I love in your book, to that respect, to in all of your work around reflection, is this idea that reflection is this tool that can really, empower our teachers. It can also do this amazing thing to help them be more resilient to whatever kind of comes their way, because they have the power and the tool of thinking, of reflection, right? To be able to, we've moved away, hopefully, in all of our districts from this very tight scripted curriculum to having rich curriculum materials and resources that we can kind of put together based off of the unique needs of our students. And that's not always easy for every teacher, especially if that autonomy is a new thing to them. But to your point, we don't have the time to kind of hold everybody's hand and be there to give them all like a tier 3 level of support. So we really have to build capacity. We have to think strategically about what each individual teacher needs, which brings us back to Daniel Pink's work, right? Which of those 3 primary drivers is driving this teacher? Do I know truly what their purpose is, why they got into education? For me, I knew the school game really well. I could play the game really well. I wasn't a very engaged learner, although I was successful. I found school to be fairly boring. I had a brother who struggled a lot with school and didn't like it. And when I decided to become a teacher, I wanted to change what teaching looked like. I wanted it to be exciting again. And like, that's my purpose, is not just to engage with the future of our world, but to really help empower them and make this an exciting experience, something that they look back on with lots of excitement. So understanding which of those drivers means we have to know our teachers and take time to build those relationships so we can empower them in the right ways. So you talk about capacity building. I just want to pause for a minute and talk a little bit about that before we go into some of the other ways that we can empower our teachers. But I think this idea of thinking of ourselves as capacity builders, not necessarily just, a leader, because leaders imply that people follow us, but that we really are there to build ours up. Robin Jackson talks about this a lot, to be a builder as opposed to a boss or a leader. So can you just describe for our audience just a little bit what a capacity builder is or does? What are some of those characteristics that we can think about when we think about ourselves as those capacity builders?
Yeah, sure. In the big scheme of things, a capacity builder is someone who helps to make somebody else better in one way or another. So your driving force is to help someone else with their improvement. So whether it's self-improvement or organizational improvement or improving their impact, that's the driving force. So as a capacity builder, when you're having a conversation with somebody else, the measure of success or effectiveness or the relevance of that conversation is if the other person walks away feeling more empowered, or feeling like they've learned something, or feeling like they're ready to take on the world, or in some ways better and more prepared. So as a capacity builder, as a coach, as an administrator, as a department chair, as a mentor, whatever your actual title or role is, you might just be the teacher across the hallway that could be a capacity builder for a colleague. The big idea is when we go into interactions, we're not trying to achieve some end for ourselves. We're looking at how can I help this person develop skills? How can I help this person increase his or her effectiveness, see things a different way? And so we do that not by filling their bucket with tools and strategies, and that's great. Those are great approaches to help. We do that by addressing what's going on between their ears. So we do that by really focusing on how they're thinking about what they're doing. You know, the old expression, we learn by doing. Right? We learn because I succeed because I fail. You know, things like that, I think, are actual misnomers. They take people in the wrong direction. We only learn by doing if, when we're doing what we're doing, we're paying attention to what we're doing and drawing a direct causative relationship between what we did and what we got. So what results occurred directly because of what we did. And when we learn that, then we can shift, we can change, we can adapt in order to improve the outcomes next time. And the one about I succeed because I fail, and that's a Michael Jordan quote. And I get what he's saying, that he's fearless in his pursuit of success. The idea there is, yeah, if you fail and fail and fail at something, just because you failed over and over and over does not mean you're going to succeed eventually. You have to allocate your mental energy to figure out, okay, hang on a second. Why did I fail? What didn't work? What steps did I take and what results did I get? And what do I want to change so that it goes differently next time? And that's the key element of capacity builders, is our ability to get into somebody else's brain, as it were, and help them reflect on and think about things differently in order to change the inputs, which then eventually change the outputs. So as a capacity builder, and you and I were talking about this off screen right before the show started, the idea of the bus question. And then I like to ask folks the bus question. We kind of changed it over the years. Now it's, let's say in the morning you get up and you get on the bus to go to work, and you think you're going on the bus that takes you directly to your school, and it ends up taking you to New York City or New Orleans or some other place, miles and miles, months and months away, and for some reason it's going to take you a long time to get back, right? Or maybe you get there and you're like, man, this is beautiful, I'm going to stay.
Exactly.
Right? The question is, how are your people better off because of the work that you have done together? So you got on the bus and you're gone. How have you built the capacity of your people to withstand your absence and to thrive even when you're not there? Because you know, time is short. Time is fleeting. Our energy and our resources are limited. So we can't be everywhere for everyone all the time. And the question becomes, how can we make sure that we are maximizing the time that we are together so that we are empowering others to do well when we leave? And that means walk out the door and go to the classroom next door, or it's the end of the day, or we get on the bus, we end up in somewhere in Anchorage.
Well, and again, I think it's kind of at the crux of, you know, our theme for November and December for the show, you know, is about empowering our teachers. Are you leaving them better than you found them and more capable than you found them? Because that's huge. One, it kind of moves into those drivers and that autonomy piece. But two, when I'm continue to be spread thin, I can lean on those that I've built capacity with to support, to help me support their peers, their colleagues, right? So now I've, got a stronger unit to be able to work in, and I'm not working alone, and I'm able to shift a little bit of the weight that's on my shoulders as a capacity builder, as a leader, and rely on some of my teammates, which builds psychological safety, it builds collective efficacy. There's a number of things it does, and it all kind of comes back to reflection, which we're going to circle back to in a minute, because something that I think, yeah, I know we could stay there forever, but there's something that you talk about that I was telling you just before we started that it's perfect, because one of the cohorts that Kim and I are working with, using your Creating a Culture Reflective Practice book as kind of our study, there is this idea of celebration. This is a huge part of empowerment. It's not that I'm coming in and I'm making sure that I understand what your drivers are, and that you have choice in this and I'm helping you grow, but that I'm helping maintain that momentum, right, in that growth. So talk a little bit for us about celebration with teachers. How important are they, and how do they work? What are some ways that we can do that?
Well, we're talking about culture, right? And so that's one of the things I really like about what you just said, about how we can share the responsibility and the load of supporting each other when we build a culture that values reflective practice, when we build a culture in which teachers are challenging each other's thinking and engaging in spirited intellectual conversation and debate about ideas and curriculum and pedagogy, et cetera, that builds this sense of, hey, there's a million ways to do this. Yeah. What do we really want to accomplish? What's the best way to go about it? And that's the whole idea behind the book and this approach of creating this culture of reflective practice, this culture of capacity building that we really want to emphasize. And so thank you for the shameless plug there.
Oh yeah, again.
So the idea, the element of celebrations is a key component of that, because we celebrate, the idea of celebration speaks to what we value. We celebrate the things that we value. We celebrate the things that we want to repeat. We celebrate the things that we're trying to accomplish. And if you think about anyone who's watching and listening to this right now, think about in your organization, what are the things that you celebrate? Those are the things that the system values, the culture values. And it may not be the things that you want to be valuing and celebrating. That may be slightly off. I had a principal friend of mine that called me one day, and he was super upset, high school principal in Maryland. And he said, Pete, I can't take it anymore. We got the big football game this weekend. And so the band is going through the hallways, and the spirit squad is going through the hallways, and all the kids are coming out of their classrooms, and they're standing there, and there's this big parade through the building, and it's this big hullabaloo. We're losing all sorts of instructional minutes, and we're getting disrupted for what? A football game, right? And I know some people are like, well, hold on, football's a big
from Texas, we love our football. So
that's right. And lots of people love football, and I think it's great. Right. Love football. That's fantastic.
But where's the time coming from, right?
Well, and is that truly what's worth disrupting our instruction? Is that the most important thing? And do we do that for the wrestling team? Do we do that for the chess squad? Do we do that for the performance that the play is going to be putting on? This. So, I mean, that becomes a big question. He says, I can't take it. We're supposed to be an institution of learning. Why aren't we celebrating learning? And my question back to him was, who's the principal over there?
Yeah.
What are you doing? And so he sent me a video a couple of weeks later of a similar disruption to the process, the spirit squad and the band and the kids coming out of their classrooms. And I said, well, what's going on? Another football game? You guys are doing well this season. And he says, no, it's PSAT day. And we're celebrating the fact that our kids are going to be taking the PSAT tomorrow. We're getting them all jazzed and ready. And it's the simple idea of what is it that we truly value, and are we in touch with do we know what we value, or do we just do things because that's the way we've always done them? So when it comes to capacity building, when it comes to celebrations of our teachers, the question becomes, what do we value? And I would posit that we value asking the right questions or just asking questions. We posit, or I would posit that we value taking risks, that we would value folks going through the reflective process and challenging themselves and making deliberate changes as a result of the information they've gathered. This pursuit of goals, achievement of goals, those are the kind of things that we want to celebrate. So as we're thinking about ways to do that, there's a ton of different ways that we can provide celebrations for teachers. We can do that within their teams and their departments, and we can publicly recognize folks for questions they ask. We can, in the moment, just celebrate and say, hey, I just want everyone to take a moment and think about this. This is a question that so-and-so is asking. Where does that question come from? Let's celebrate the thinking that led to that question for a second. Third-party compliments, some of my favorites. You know, you go into one classroom, you see something that's going on, you go to the next classroom and you compliment the previous teacher to the next teacher and say, you know what, this is something that I just saw in the classroom next door. And I guarantee that teachers will have those conversations. And when they hear that you're providing those compliments and offering those celebrations, those kind of things get repeated, right? Yeah. And we're not necessarily talking about balloons and cakes and special parking spots and things like that. We're talking about
passes, Sonic drinks. Those are big.
Right. And right. Those are great.
Yeah, they're great. Yeah.
But the things that actually shift the culture of an organization are the authentic celebrations of people trying things for the first time and having, taking risks and having the strength to ask a question in front of people and say, you know what, I don't know. And celebrating that in the moment and saying, you know how hard it is to say in front of your peers, you don't know something, or, hey, I have a question. I should probably know this, but I'm not sure exactly. That takes guts and strength and power. And that is an incredible opportunity to be recognized and celebrated. So I think it's essential that we take a few moments and identify what is it that we truly value. What are the things that we really want to see in this organization? What are the things that are actually going to make a difference in our practice and in our outcomes? And then as a team of capacity builders, this is how we tend to start it. So administrators, coaches, our instructional leadership team, whoever that might include, those folks sit down and say, okay, so let's brainstorm a dozen, 24 different ways that we could authentically celebrate folks that are doing these things that we value. Yeah. And then go and try them out, put them into practice and see how they land.
Be intentional about it, and I think what I love about the examples that you've provided and, what you've shared is you've talked about doing this in a very public way, and I sometimes talk with coaches about, who will say, oh yeah, I do. I celebrate, I make sure that I recognize the progress with the teachers that I'm working with. But often, as we talk a little bit more about the types of celebrations they do, we find that there's this difference between public and private, right? That private is, Pete, this is amazing. Did you see the progress? Let's just look back at a video that we recorded at the beginning of the year. And we have this little celebration moment, but it's stuck in that classroom or in that meeting. And I don't publicly shout from the rooftop to everybody else that Pete's done this amazing thing, or he's worked really hard and he's failing forward, or he's just spending a lot of his time and effort doing this, or he's asked this question. And that's not always so I like to challenge coaches to get them to think about, how are you spreading the word to others, to peers? And some teachers aren't very comfortable with that, so you've got to think about how you do that, but making sure that, you're mentioning it to the next teacher you see, to say, hey, I was in Pete's class earlier this morning, and you might want to check with him because he was actually doing something very similar to that, right? That's about building that capacity. And it also builds that collective efficacy, right? Which we know is a huge factor in boosting not just a year's worth of achievement, but up to 3 years worth of achievement, So I just think that that's really important from what you said, is taking stock and looking at, what do we celebrate? And does it align to the values and the priorities that we are saying are important, that we're spending our time in staff days and PD days, focusing on, but never coming back and celebrating any momentum towards that or
Right.
focus on that. But then also thinking about, are we making sure that we're doing this in our department meetings, and that the words reaching different ears besides just the person that we're celebrating? So I think that's really important too.
And I think those both are important. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said some teachers don't like that public recognition.
They don't
feel comfortable. So part of it is also asking folks how they like to be celebrated, right? And getting to know them, to know which people prefer a one-on-one conversation in the hallway, when it's quiet and that everyone's gone home for the day, and you're like, hey, I just wanted to acknowledge some of the great work you've been doing, and here's a couple of things that I've noticed, and I really appreciate seeing that. And the folks that need that, big hullabaloo in the faculty meeting. Oh, everybody, by the way, let's bow to so-and-so because she's
as they enter the room, right? Yeah.
So in
a differentiation.
Way, right?
Yes, exactly.
And we just need to know our people, so we know how those work. And like you said, the big idea is, how do we spread the good word, right? Of what amazing things are happening. And do we know what those amazing things that we value are? And that's, in this state of, standardized testing and, our heightened focus on test scores and blah, blah, blah. We sometimes fall into the trap of only celebrating achievement and achievement at a certain level and achievement for particular. And what we don't do is celebrate the questions in the process that help to get us there. So I would challenge folks.
It's not a go big or go home thing, right?
Yeah.
It's not always go big or go home. So
I would challenge folks to be thinking about what it is you actually value, and then what are some authentic ways that you can celebrate those things happening.
I'm always looking for great ideas for those. So I would love for our audience to share some of those authentic ways that you're celebrating. Being able to just kind of share these ideas. I know we're always looking for them, like ways to kind of shake it up just a little bit, but do that in an authentic way. I think that would be great if our audience was interested in sharing. So maybe you might, win a little prize for sharing that as well. We'll celebrate.
Ooh, there's an incentive right there. Chime in.
Maybe I'll send you a book.
Ooh, now if that doesn't get people going, I don't know what will.
Exactly. So as we wrap up, I've kind of kept you long enough for today, but I would love for you, again, coming full circle back to this idea of reflection, which is something that, is a passion of mine as an educator and as a capacity builder. And it's a real central tenet to our show here on the Coach Replay Show. We talk a lot about the use of video because it's such a powerful tool for reflection. So real quick, I just would love for you to wrap us up today with a few quick tips that you can share with coaches and other capacity builders to help build teachers' reflection skills. What do you got for us?
All right. So what we'll do is I'll give you the quick and dirty beginner's tool, and it's actually also an advanced tool depending on how reflective your teachers are and how skilled you become in using it. It's called the reflective cycle, and it's something that Elisa and I published in Creating a Culture of Reflective Practice. It's also, we've published it in a number of books now.
Yeah, it's in a few of your books.
For teachers and for capacity builders. It is a super handy coaching tool that you can use in any conversation with anybody about anything. It basically follows this cycle of 4 different steps. The first step is building awareness, which really speaks to the idea of what's your goal, what's your outcome, what are you trying to accomplish here, what do you want to work on, what do you want to learn, what's the thing, right? And most people can tell us what the thing is that they're working on or what they're trying to accomplish. So in this lesson, what were you expecting to see? What was your goal for student output, for instance? And then the second step is to think and act with intentionality. So as a coach, then we ask folks, okay, so what did you do in order to achieve that goal? What steps did you take? How did you decide this strategy? How did you determine the layout of the classroom? How did you determine how you were going to group students? How did you determine the steps in the process? Just going through the thinking of what teachers did on purpose. So we're talking past tense right now. So what was your goal? What steps did you take? And then the third step is, well, what did you notice happened as a direct result of what you did and what you planned? So you made this decision, you took this action. What happened as a result? And we're really trying to be really explicit about the cause and effect between what you did and what happened specifically as a result of that. And in education, we have been really, really good at analyzing data. We have become really good at analyzing data. We have not become really good at analyzing the cause and effect in the data process. So not necessarily what you said, how you said it. We'll say, well, this is what happened. You know, this is how the kids performed. This is the results I got.
Right.
We don't often go back to, well, why exactly did you get those results? Why exactly is this level of performance what it is? How did you teach it that led to that result? So that's where we really want to spend quite a bit of attention, because that shifts, talk about transformational, that shifts thinking immensely when we get to that point. And only then can we say, we go to that fourth quadrant, which is become responsive and adapt. That's where we adapt and adjust and change things. If we want outcomes to be different, we change the thinking and the decisions that we make and the actions that we take. And if we want it to be the same, if we want to repeat that, then we say, okay, we dedicate ourselves to following that same pattern again. And as coaches, that's a very simple way to walk folks through an action that they take to get them comfortable with that reflective cycle, with that process. And eventually we get to the point where we shift the tense of the questions, because folks will say, hey, I got this problem, help me, I have to figure out a plan for this. And we start with, okay, so what's the goal? What are you trying to, what's the problem? What's the challenge? What's that's quadrant one. And then we go, so what could you do? What steps could you take to address this? And you brainstorm together, and maybe you use some of your expertise of what you've seen in other classrooms, and we help fuel that decision-making process. What we typically do then, what has historically happened in education, is then we say, okay, go try it, go get them. And we don't take them to that third quadrant yet. And that third quadrant is when we ask folks to think about, okay, so when you do this really well, when this goes spectacularly well in your classroom today, what happens? What do you see? What are you going to notice? What are you going to hear from your kids? And we have teachers engage in a process of visualization so that they know what to look for and listen for in their classrooms. So rather than just go get them, it's go get them and listen for this, watch for this, look and see if this happens, notice these things. So they're focused on something, because you know the rule, you get what you focus on, and you'll see what you're looking for, right? So if you're looking for particular outcomes, that's what your actions are all going to drive towards that. Then you come back later and say, okay, so let's talk about it. And then you're having the past tense conversation. So that reflective cycle, which we can make sure that folks have access to a copy of, or some version of it in the notes for this session, that can be a really powerful, relatively simple coaching strategy to use. And you can use it with video, you can use it with a lesson that occurred, you can use it with planning something that's upcoming. It's quite versatile.
Student artifacts, right? Student products. Yeah. And I love that you can start with it in the past tense, and you're kind of more reactive in that sense. But the goal is that you work through the process enough times that it becomes proactive. It becomes the way that we kind of teach them that, and back to that autonomy, right? It becomes these questions that, because it's these kind of four simple questions or stages of the cycle, if we do that enough with our teachers, we're teaching them that process that they can do on their own. And we build autonomy and capacity. And then, we do that with all of the teachers in a particular department, and then the PLC is thinking that way, right? So we've got group reflection happening. That reflective cycle is a really simple but powerful tool to do just that. Empower our teachers to own their instruction, own the student outcomes and the learning that happens, and be able to take action when it's not what they want it to be, or when they want to do something different and try something new. They've got a proactive way to do that.
Yep. And it builds a habit of thinking that extends beyond the classroom. And that's the thing that we've noticed about this work is it goes way beyond just your teaching responsibilities and just the things that you've been prompted by your capacity builder. It goes into the way that you drive and the way that you cook and the way that you do your hair, or so I've heard, or the other things that we do in our lives.
Yeah.
If we have a particular outcome we're striving for, it makes sense to allocate our mental energy towards that. So we're super excited, and I'm grateful that I have the opportunity to share it with you, and that you have embraced this work and share it with the folks you work with. It's super flattering, and we appreciate that.
It's so much. So, folks, download the notes and takeaways. You'll get access to a few more of Pete's tips and some summaries from our highlights from this episode, as well as where you can find Pete on social media, and his partner, Elisa, as well. We'll tag her in there. And the book, I will send you a free copy of the book if you share some really great, authentic ideas for how you're celebrating or can celebrate the people in your organization. So that's our challenge. Go out and empower someone, build capacity, right? Yeah. All right, Pete. Well, thanks so much for joining us. I know we'll have you on again some other time. Enjoy.
That sounds
your
terrific.
day. Yeah,
well,
I think we should.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Yes, it is. All right, folks, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe, and tune in next week for another episode. Bye, everyone.